You are listening to the Wool Academy podcast. This is episode number 56. Hello and welcome. My name is Elisabeth van Delden, and once a week we talk to an industry expert from the wool industry supply chain from farm to fashion and beyond, delivering strategies and insights to be successful in wool and showcasing those beautiful stories wool has to tell. Today, I welcome Victor Chesky to the show. Victor is a journalist and wool industry publisher based out of Melbourne in Australia. Victor publishes the magazine Wool2Yearn Global and Wool2Yarn China, as well as the digital news platform Wool News. He will tell us all about his publications in a moment. But first, a very warm welcome to you, Victor. How are you today?
I'm very well, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. I would like to start by you telling us a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do in the wool industry.
Well, we are a publishing company. We provide information to the industry about what's happening with wool generally. We very much concentrate on early wool production and all the way to yarn. We deal with all aspects of industry from wool exports to yarn. We publish a number of magazines, 2 magazines, and we have various publications online. We very much concentrating on wool, and we believe that the difference between maybe our publications and other publications around is that we try to bring more commercial aspects to our articles. We provide a link to some extent between the buyers and sellers. We have always believed that it is important to link the production and manufacturing part of the industry with buying part of the industry. For example, if you are an exporter of wool, we try to provide information which helps you to connect to the wool buyers. If you are a yarn manufacturer, we try to connect you with buyers and manufacturers of fabric and so on. So this is, we are a publishing company. We don't buy or sell wool. We just concentrate on publishing.
So you're saying you're also kind of like a platform for people to meet and do business then through your publication?
Yes. We are very much a link between the buying side and selling side and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you focus pretty much on wool, that means you also cover a little bit of other animal hair fibers?
We do specialty fibers. We do mohair. We cover most of the natural specialty fibers. We have special section in our magazine which deal with various luxury fibers. We try to address each area where our readers are, which is importers of wool, manufacturers of tops and yarn, and manufacturers of fabric. We do not do cotton. We do not do man-made fiber. We very much concentrate on the natural fiber side.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And someone who hasn't yet seen your publication, how would you describe it, and what kind of content would one find in it?
Well, we publish 2 annual magazines. One of them is Wool2Yearn Global, and another one is Wool2Yarn China. Each publication have a circulation of 5,000 copies. Our Chinese magazine is published in Chinese, and it is circulated in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And the distribution of our magazine in China is done by Nanjing Wool Market and China Wool Textile Association. For people who do business in China, those 2 companies would be quite well known. We distribute our English language magazine, Wool2Yearn Global, in 60 countries worldwide. I would say that any company which has any interest in wool from tops to fabric would be reading our magazines. We also have two online products. One of this product is Wool News. It is an electronic newsletter which is circulated free of charge to 3,000 textile companies around the world, and it's a monthly. And we created a selling platform for the industry called woolbuy.net. This is an online website where people can go and sell or buy wool, tops, and yarn. Those online publications are free of charge to both sellers and buyers, and we're quite proud of this online presence there. It seems to be doing really well at present.
So did you get a lot of requests from people telling you, oh, I want to sell or buy something, and that's how you came up with the idea, or how did you start this woolbuy.net?
Our woolbuy.net is a website where sellers and buyers can meet, if you want to call it that way. The wool buyers can list the products they have for sale, and the buyers can go through those products and see what's available to buy. We are a publishing company. Because we don't sell or buy wool, we're independent from this trading side, and people feel comfortable using our platform because we do not have an invested interest in selling or buying wool. The listing of wool is free of charge, so anybody can go and list their product in there. I also noticed that there's a lot of communication going on between buyers and sellers, but we specifically exempt ourselves from being able to see this communication between buyers and sellers because we felt this communication should be kept confidential between the two parties. So if you ask me who is buying what, I do not know. I can just see that sort of a traffic coming to the website, but yeah. I'm not privy to the communication between buyers and sellers. At present, there is probably about 300 or 400 listings on that website. And I think that considering that it's been only going for about 16 to 18 months, I think it's doing reasonably well.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. And I looked at it as well, and I saw it was often from countries who may not have their own selling system, so they are making use of your service in that because they don't have other.
That's very true. Yeah. That's very true. There is a lot of listings in there from countries outside of your normal wool selling countries, such as Australia, New Zealand, or South Africa, for example. And that also allows wool buyers to see some different type of wool available, some different type of yarn even manufactured in some other countries. So we feel it's opened a new venue for the industry to try to tap into. And it's also providing quite a lot of space, advertising space, if you want to call it, for those exporters who are based in those countries, like Iran, Iraq, and so on, which do not have the selling system. So it allows them to promote their product worldwide.
Yeah, it gives them more market access. That makes it quite interesting. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great. And now I would like to talk a little bit more about you as the person, Victor. How did you get started in the wool industry? And if I'm correct, you have a slight, if it's Russian accent in your Australian English.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
No, I love accents, but it makes you a very interesting person to ask. How did you actually get into the wool industry?
I started in 1980s in New Zealand. I was working for a daily newspaper. That was my introduction to sort of publishing business. And in 1980s, the biggest wool buyer in the world was Russia. And the way I was dropped into it, shall we say, was by the New Zealand wool exporters who have asked me to produce a magazine for them to promote New Zealand wool to Russia. So first of our publications was actually published in Russian in 1986. the Australians have found very interesting that New Zealanders do that and invited me to come and do one for Australia. So for some time we were publishing two separate magazines, one for Australia, one for New Zealand. By beginning of 2000, the market have changed completely, and China was dominant in buying wool. So I was asked to change the publication into something which Chinese can read. The difficulties at that time was that communication between China and outside world was very problematic because of the language problems. So the Chinese language publication was a necessity for the wool industry at the time. So I started publishing our publication in Chinese, and then we added on later on an English language publication, which was extended straight throughout the world. And the industry have embraced both of those magazines, and it's been going sort of stronger and stronger every year, which we're very pleased about, obviously.
Indeed, yes.
And that's how it's all started. We're actually celebrating the 31st year of publishing this year.
Wow, congratulations. That's excellent.
Yes.
And what then, I mean, to kind of, I guess it seems you kind of by accident got into the wool industry, but then you kept at it for now 3 decades. So what fascinates you about wool? What motivated you to continue?
Well, I think the right answer would be the fiber itself, the wool, which is a quite amazing fiber if you look how it's grown and where it's grown, and if you look where it's finishing up to be in what variety of different products. But for me, I think the biggest fixation, if you want to call it that way, was people around the wool industry. When I started in the wool industry in the 1980s, the wool industry was dominated by very, very strong personalities. People with all sorts of interesting ideas, and it was just very, very interesting to talk to those people, to communicate with those people, and work with those people. So my answer to this question probably would be people, just extremely interesting people, which I met over the last 30 years. Now looking back at it, I actually think it was quite amazing, the number of people I met, and I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to meet so many people.
Yes, and that brings me also to my next question that I wanted to ask you, that you actually travel around the world quite a bit to meet all the different customers or companies that you write about. So tell us a little bit more about this traveling, and maybe also what would be your most favorite wool destinations in the world and why?
The world is endlessly fascinating place. I travel quite a lot and get very tired of it, but it is quite amazing, the places I sometimes visit. Not very much sort of touristy type of places, but out of the beat places where some of the manufacturing is done and so on. I very much believe in face-to-face meetings with people. I think it's quite important, and that's why I travel quite a lot. To say that I have some favorite places, I can't really say that I have a favorite place, but there is some places which I always love to go to. I love visiting your home country, Germany, because sausages do hold a special appeal for me. I also very much enjoyed traveling in South Africa, visiting people there. But I'm coming back to the same issue about people. It's not so much the places which attracts or become favorite because of the place. It is more to do with people who you meet there. So you probably have some meetings you're looking forward to because you know the people are nice and so on. that's probably my answer to that question, if that's okay.
Yes, it's a very diplomatic question. Although I don't know how German sausages relate to wool, but we can just leave it at that you like German sausages.
I'll
And
leave it. I'll leave it
yeah.
at that.
So, but then let me ask you, you are also then an observer and a documenter of the wool industry. And is there actually something that you can see from looking at the industry that maybe the people who are working within the industry don't really see?
The one thing I've noticed in the last couple of years is a rapid change, particularly when it comes to innovation and new development. The other change in our industry, I think, is the fact that the customers today demand functionality from their garments, and they want them to function at multiple levels at the same time. And industry is quite well addressing those issues, in my opinion. The innovation side is, a lot of companies innovating quite new products which are using wool for, and the products which have traditionally been using wool are now getting more and more into very much functional wool fiber. I must say that it's very much to do with the finer wools. I do have concern for a crossbred wool side, which I think is lacking this innovation drive. There is not that many new developments, new products have been developed with crossbred wools, and I think this is one of the reasons why the industry is struggling at present. So the main change, in my opinion, is how scientific the wool industry became from 50 years ago, just manufacturing suits and manufacturing carpets. If you look today, we manufacture so many different products which consume wool, from shoes to bags to rainproof coats, and using them in computers, using them for insulation, using them for all sorts of things. And I think that's probably a very big change from my perspective, which has happened in the last couple of years.
And do you also see something like on the horizon that will be like a new trend that will hit the industry?
I think that one of the most interesting developments, which I could sort of sense, is innovating, sort of coming up with the products which have not usually utilized wool, and now looking at doing so. And it's mostly to do in the building industry. I think there is a lot of products which the wool industry, the building industry, can develop using wool. I know we've been using carpets for hundreds of years and so on, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about paneling. I'm talking about even building walls and building fiber optics using wool cabling and all sorts sort of things. I think that is going to be an area which, if the industry can keep up with developing and innovating processing of wool in such a way that it could be utilized in this type of industry, it would be a major lift. We need to step out a little bit from carpet and from garments and start looking further afield, if we can, as an industry, to create that extra demand to keep the prices up, to keep it at a level where farmers are still producing wool.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting perspective. And yeah, I guess everyone's always so focused on what they're doing, but sometimes it's necessary to just lift our heads and kind of see where we're going as a whole as well. And then I would like to also talk a little bit about your magazine and what I guess, I'm also very passionate about communications and getting the message across. So your magazine gives the opportunity to companies to also get their message across and communicate about themselves. And is there something you would recommend to the businesses that, advertise or write articles that they can do better in this area to tell their story?
Yes, I would very much recommend that to everybody. I don't think that anybody is going to buy a product from a company they don't know anything about. I think that communication is very important. I think that our industry is not large. There is a not that huge number of players, but there is a number of players, in my view, who do not know what the other players are doing, and that's sometimes a lost business opportunity. So yes, I would very much recommend companies to be visible. And I'm not talking about advertising in particular. I'm just talking about generally not be shy to come out and say what they're doing and what they would like to do with other people as a joint ventures and so on. I think that this communication is fundamental. Otherwise, you just get slaughtered by your competitors who do better communications than you do. There is all sorts of way of communicating, not just magazines. There's obviously all sorts of online options and presentations for conference and so on. But yes, I very much recommend for companies to be visible. I also would like to make a point, maybe, if people do listen to this type of sort of presentation from me, is that I find it quite interesting dealing with a lot of companies around the world. How little attention those companies pay to their existing customer base. Every company I visit want to promote their products to increase their sales to a new customer base, and it's obviously a very right thing to do. But everybody seems to be ignoring the customers they already have, and I find it quite strange because those customers are not necessarily going to stay with you. They might move to your competitors one day, and keeping them is just as important as bringing the new customers on board. And to keep those customers usually takes very little effort because they're already there. But I find a lot of companies just completely ignore that particular side of their business. And I would very much encourage companies to communicate more, but communicate more not just with regards to the potentially new customer base, but to communicate to their existing clients, to keep reminding them that they're doing the right thing by buying from them. That's probably one of the strongest points we try to communicate to our customer base, because we very much value our customer base and we look after them.
Yeah, and I guess by talking to your existing customers more, you might, get new business opportunities because you are more informed of what they're working on, what they need, and then you can react and offer and be a partner of what they're about to do as well. Yeah, no, that's true, and I guess that's basic business advice, but I guess, it seems always more inspiring to get new customers than keeping the old ones. But yeah, I agree totally what you're saying. And then another question in relation to that, you also publish your magazine in Chinese or like dedicated to the Chinese target audience. And you already also, when you said in the beginning how your whole company started is because there was this communication gap first towards Russia, then now to China. And is there still today a big communication gap between China and the rest of the wool industry? And is there something that companies can do to better overcome this gap?
Yes, I believe so. I believe so very much. The communication gap is still there in a quite a big way. I know that a lot of Chinese companies now employ quite a lot of staff who speaks English, but I still believe that the decision-making within most companies in China I still have the language barrier because they do not speak English, so everything needs to be translated to them. the barrier, which in my view is constantly there, is that when you rely on a translation from people in China, you actually never know how accurate this translation is. So when people travel to China or want to communicate to Chinese, the level of translation is very important. We publish our magazine in China for many, many years, and have quite a lot of experience with printing in Chinese. But to answer your question, yes, I believe the language barrier is still there. I think that a lot of communication is misunderstood or not understood fully. So for our industry to develop communication to China in Chinese would be extremely beneficial.
Do you think, like, if the communications improve, what would be the benefit for both sides? Do you think there would be more business or more innovation, or what would happen?
I think that business would increase. I think that a lot of companies in the West look at China as a problematic area to do business because of the language barrier. I also know that the Chinese sometimes come to do business, for example, in Europe or United States, and unable to succeed because the language issues, because some things were misunderstood or not properly explained, and so on. So there is still quite a bit of work to do. Some companies in our industry are already very well set up in China because they have been in China for many years, and they have developed a strong communication link in Chinese with local Chinese representatives there and so on. But for a newcomer coming to China, language is still an issue. And I would just recommend to the companies to use people they know can deliver their message correctly. And if they are promoting themselves in China through various magazines and so on, or online services, that they be careful and be sure that whatever they're saying is going to be understood in China.
Yeah, often the symbols and values can be quite different. That it could be maybe something.
Yes, it is. And
Yeah.
our Chinese magazine has been published in China for many years, and we consistently ask our Chinese counterparts in China to check everything before we go to print. And some of the texts we publish in our magazines are very technical texts to do with wool testings and to do with textile machinery, engineering side, and so on. We're quite proud of the fact that we think our Chinese publication has been well translated and well understood. So feedback we have from China is quite positive. But generally, communication can be a real problem, and we as an industry probably should put a bit more effort into communicating with people in China. If you consider how important that China is as a manufacturing base for the wool industry, yes, I think we should put a bit more effort into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good advice as well. And you just spoke there are magazines and there are online magazines now. How do you see the publishing world develop? Will printed magazines still be a format in the future, or will everything be online? How do you see it going forward?
We very much rely on our printed magazines. I'm very well aware that online services is marching on and the industry embracing them, not just in our industry, but in every type of industries. I'm not sure that printed format will become a thing of the past so quickly. We have gone from drawing on a rock to writing on scrolls to printing paper and while the next step is certainly part of that evolution will be online, we still think that the printed matter or printed magazines provide a very trustful source of information. And the word trust is probably the most important part of it. I'm not trying to diminish online publications. I'm just saying that for some reason or another, we found that our customer base very much like to have the magazines, physical magazines. They can flick through it. They can refer to it later on. We know that a lot of our readers keep the magazines in their drawer and from time to time pull it out as an information link if they want to find a name of a person or a company somewhere in South Africa or Zimbabwe or whatever it might be. So I do accept the fact that online is marching on. I do accept that a lot of publications are moving online, and we're doing the same with some of our publications, but we do still think that the printed matter still have some time to play itself out.
Yeah, and I guess it's the same like buying fashion online or in store, and for the moment it seems both can work quite well next to each other and complement each other, and that's probably also for some time going forward. The same for magazines that can be both in printed and online format to just complement, and however you need to use it at each point you can have access to it.
Yes, I agree with that.
Great. Now, my last question is, again, more of a personal one before we come to an end. You already spoke a lot that actually what fascinates you about the wool industry are the people, but maybe is there like some event or some experience that you had working in the wool industry that is your favorite moment, that, or like a story or anecdote that you like to tell over and over again?
Oh, I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't necessarily have a favorite moment. For some of us who have attended the Nanjing Wool Market Conference, would know that one of the highlights for the Nanjing Wool Market Conference is a dinner, which is attended by about 500-600 people. And it's a dinner which followed with entertainment, and it's quite an interesting event. And I attend that conference every year, and every year I get amazed at the amount of business, at the amount of drinking, at the amount of communication going on at that dinner. And what fascinates me is that majority of people there cannot speak any English, and they are communicating with people who cannot speak Chinese. And for some reason or another, in this particular dinner, it seems to be okay. The people seem to understand what it's all about. It's very fascinating to watch how this communication going on between 500-600 people in one big hall. So if you would like to point out one particular event which I find quite fascinating, it would be that a banquet at Nanjing Wool Market Conference.
Yeah, that's actually also one of my favorite moments. Those dinners are amazing and hard to believe how, yeah. And you're right, what you described, that yeah, you do communicate with Chinese, although you don't speak their language, and it's a really special event. I agree. So now let's come to an end with our interview. Thank you so much for your time. Where can our listeners find out more about your magazines and your online platforms? Where should they go?
We are very easy accessible online. Our publications, our magazine publication can be viewed on www.Wool2YarnGlobal.com, and number 2 is a number 2, Wool2YarnGlobal.com. Our online publication for newsletters and our buying platform for Wool Bike would be viewed at www.woolnews.net. and www.woolbuy.net.
Excellent. So, and I'll make sure to also link to all the sites that you just mentioned on the show notes so that people can find it very easily. Well, Victor, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope all goes well in the future for your publications as they are so valuable for the industry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hopefully you enjoyed our little talk today with Victor Chesky. Victor mentioned a lot of different websites today. If you did not catch them all, head on over to the show notes of today's episode to find everything that was mentioned today. Go to elisabethvandelden.com/056. Once again, elisabethvandelden.com/056. Don't want to miss out on any of the future episodes? Then subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, and also like us on Facebook at Elisabeth Van Delden. Thank you and see you next week.